Hi friends, I'm really excited to bring you this canning recipe that I developed. I don't think there's anything like it on the internet anywhere. I was looking for recipes for canning beef birria, which is a nice hearty beef soup. You can use the delicious tender meat in tacos, or you can serve it as a soup together with the broth. If you do serve this as tacos, you can dip your corn tortillas in the broth before you fry them, and you just add queso with your beef to the tortilla and you have a delicious dinner. You can dip your tacos in this sauce also. But just be aware that this has not been USDA tested or approved. It's my own creation. Now, you're seeing this video because I know it's successful. I went through all the steps, I filmed them. I have never done this before. It's like a first effort, so I wasn't sure if I'd be successful, but it was delicious. We had it for dinner last night. We had our tacos, and they were really good. This is a good way you can can it so that you can make 6 or 7 meals out of one session of cooking. And another option for you is if you don't want to can this, you can just take this recipe. When you get to the point where we've made the sauce, you can just add the meat back in and let it stew for several hours on your stovetop. You don't have to can it. But I'm going to take you through all the steps for canning in case you'd like to do the canning. All right, so let's get started. This is going to be a lot of fun. You are going to really love these birria tacos. Hello friends, and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to make a traditional Mexican stew or soup known as birria. We're going to make birria de res, which is beef birria. I'm going to use some homemade beef broth. I've got a variety of spices that we'll go through, a few little fresh vegetables, and of course the star of the show. We've got about 6 pounds of beef. Now I was looking for chuck, and my market only had about 3 pounds of chuck, and we also have 3 pounds of tri-tip. So we've got about 6 pounds of beef, and the canning process is going to make this very tender and fall apart. It's also going to infuse the meat with the flavors of the marinade. So what is birria? It is a soup or a stew, and primarily made with meat and chilies. And you can serve this as either a soup or stew, or you can shred the beef and make it into birria tacos. So first we're going to prepare a chili marinade. We're going to brown our beef. We're going to make a sauce, and it's going to be, initially it's going to be a puree, which is not good for canning. You don't want anything too thick like a puree when you're canning. So we're going to add broth, and if necessary, we're going to add a little more water to make this a good consistency so that it'll can properly. So let's go ahead and get started. I'll list the ingredients I used in the description box below, but I thought I'd just take you through them real quickly. We're going to use guajillo chili pods. These are a mild chili with a great flavor, great deep flavor. And we're also going to add a lesser amount of ancho chilies, maybe just 1 or 2 of these. These have a more smoky and a deep flavor, and they can be bitter. So we're going to just probably add only 1 or maybe 2 of those. And then if you'd like, you can add other chilies. You can add the chile de arbol, which is also sold in packages like this. It's very hot. So if you like hot, you're going to want to add some chile de arbol. I also happen to have some chipotle chili powder. I may use that. I've got some hatch chili flakes. I may use those. So we'll see. You know, you can make this recipe your own. You don't have to stick to any strict recipe of somebody else. There are so many different ways and so many different recipes I've seen online for making birria, and I have never seen a canning video. So I'm going to make sure this comes out as delicious as I think it's going to be. I'm going to try it before I put this video online. So if you see in this video, you're going to know that it came out great. So I'm going to use homemade beef bone broth. Now, normally they recommend using, when you make this on your stove top or in the oven, they recommend a bone-in roast. But I'm going to be using my own bone broth, so I'm not going to need the bone. We've already got the ingredients from the bone that's going to be making this a delicious stew. I'm going to use the juice of an orange. That's totally optional. I'm going to be using about a 1/4 teaspoon of fresh ginger. I'm going to put a bay leaf in each jar. Now, some recipes have you throw the bay leaf into the marinade and grind it up, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to leave these whole and take them out as I serve the birria. We're going to use some ground cumin. We're going to use Mexican oregano. Now, this is not the same as Mediterranean oregano. This has got a totally different flavor, so you do want to look for Mexican oregano. We're going to use a very small amount of thyme. I mean, just teeny tiny bits. A small amount of marjoram. A very small amount of ground coriander, which is the seed of the cilantro. So it'll give it a little bit of that cilantro flavor without being too overwhelming. A little pinch of ground nutmeg or mace if you have mace. A little bit of clove, maybe 1 or 2 cloves that I'm going to throw in there. And we're going to use about 1/2 cinnamon stick. We're also going to add a little bit of apple cider vinegar to give it a good flavor and also to help tenderize the beef. Our fresh vegetables that we're going to use are going to be an onion. I've also got a shallot left over that I'm going to throw in. I'm going to use about 1/2 of this bulb of garlic. We're going to use 1 Roma tomato. We're going to roast that in a pan, and we're going to roast a couple of tomatillos. If you don't have tomatillos and a tomato, you can leave them out. It's totally optional. But I kind of like this flavor. So instead of relying on green sauce added at the end, I'm going to incorporate a little bit of tomatillo right into my sauce that I'm cooking the meat in. The first thing we're going to do is cube our meat into about 1 or 1.5 cubes. All right, so I have cubed the beef. This is the tri-tip. This is the chuck. This is leftover, just gross big pieces of fat that ordinarily when you're cooking on the stovetop or whatever, you would just leave that in for flavor. But this is a canning recipe, so I don't want there to be too much fat that might interfere with the seal. I still have plenty of marbling in this beef. It's going to have plenty of flavor. And this I'm going to put in the freezer with my leftover beef bones. And next time I make beef broth, this is going to infuse my beef broth with a lot of good flavor. Although you could render this down and use the beef tallow to fry your tortillas if you'd like. That's another option too. But I'm gonna save this in the freezer for the next time I make beef broth. This is my freezer bag full of bones and beef scraps, and I tossed in the leftover fat, and I'm going to be making a batch of beef broth with this pretty soon. 2 good-sized ancho pisillo chilies here. I've got about 8 or 10 of the guajillo chilies here. We're going to remove the stem and shake out the seeds, and I'll show you how easy that is to do. And then after we do that, they'll be prepared, and we're going to boil them. So this is very simple. Get a bowl nearby to put the seeds in, because you don't want the seeds, they're a little bit bitter. So we're going to pop off the stem, throw it away, knock out the seeds. You can tear them open a little bit to do this. There are quite a few seeds in these. You can take out the central vein there. And that one is ready to go. I'm going to do the rest of these just the same way. Pop off the stem, throw it away. Since these are nice and dry, it's pretty easy to shake out the seeds. And you want to make sure that they're good and that there's nothing, they haven't molded in the storage process or anything like that. These look nice and fresh. I just bought them, so. These really smell good. Okay, that's 2 down. And we're going to do an ancho as well. Let me see, I may have to, this is a little bit, it's not crisp, it's a little more soft, so I'm going to cut it open to see about the seeds. My kitchen shears. There are the seeds. I knew they were in there. So I'm going to finish deseeding all these and then we'll come back when that's done. You see here inside this guajillo, I found a little moldy spot. And this has got a lot of mold in it, so I'm going to just throw this one away. Into the reject pile it goes, because you don't want to serve moldy food to your family. Not good. And this is where it's good to make your own food and can your own food for your family, because if this was something made by a restaurant, they probably aren't inspecting each chili one by one like I'm doing here. They might just be popping off the top, shaking out whatever seeds come out and throwing it into the pot. And you could very well be getting mold. So when you make it yourself, it's a little better quality than you would get, even in a restaurant. Here's the next chili. I've taken out the seeds. There is no sign of any mold. This looks really good. Here is another kind of a moldy spot. A no good chili. Okay, here they are, all seeded, split open so I could inspect them. I've got about 10 guajillo. Look how beautiful this one is. And a couple of ancho poblano. And these are very nice as well. These give a kind of a smoky, earthy flavor. They're often used when they're fresh for chile rellenos. So let's get these into a pot of water. We'll bring it to a boil and let them soak for about 15 minutes to reconstitute. I put some salt and pepper on the beef and I'm going to brown it. So just for a couple minutes to give it a little bit of that brown caramelization that tastes so good. And then we'll remove this to a bowl. Okay, I've salt and peppered the beef, browning it a little bit. Of course, you're not cooking it. The canning process is going to cook the beef completely. We're going to brown it in batches. Meanwhile, we've got our chilies in boiling water here. So the water has come to a boil. I'm going to turn it off, cover these, and let them sit for 15 minutes. And that's just enough water to cover. Okay, so let's get our next batch of beef into the pot here. I've salt and peppered it. Brown it a little bit. And I've got about another batch of beef to brown after this batch is done. Now we've set the beef aside. It's just lightly browned. We're going to let that cool, and in our warm pot here, we're going to throw in our vegetables. So that's 1 tomato, an onion, and a couple of tomatillos that I've peeled, rinsed, and chopped them coarsely. And we're going to just cook these for about 5-10 minutes until they all get nice and roasty toasty. Meanwhile, our chilies here are reconstituting nicely, kind of steaming there. It's really starting to smell great in here. Now, for the beef, you can just use regular salt and pepper, or you can use Szechuan seasoning to kind of season it. But I use Szechuan seasoning, but my recipe calls for just salt and pepper. But use whichever one you prefer. If you like things with a little more flavor, then go for the Sazon. And I'll show you the one I used. This Birria Complete. It's just got a lot of nice flavors in it. Garlic, onion, Mexican oregano, lots of goodies. Okay, so we'll stir these vegetables and we'll be back in just a few minutes. I almost forgot my 6 cloves of garlic and my chopped shallot. Don't forget your garlic. So I've added some of the beef broth here. We want to deglaze this pot and get all the brown bits up off the bottom while we're cooking the veggies. This is going to cook for just a few minutes, just long enough to soften everything a bit and give it a nice roasty flavor. Now that the veggies are softened, I've turned off my heat for now. We're going to add our chilies. We'll just get them out of the water. They look nice and soft, fully rehydrated and reconstituted. You don't want to cook them too long because they could get bitter. We're going to add these to the other vegetables. And this is how we make our marinade. So we've got our vegetables, our chilies. We're going to add the spices. You can use this water. I've heard both advice for and against using this water. Some say it's bitter, some say it's good, so I'm going to give it a taste test just to let you know if I'm going to be using it or not. Yeah, my opinion is it's a little bit bitter, so I'm going to just discard this. Now that we've got the chilies in here and the veggies, we're going to add our spices. So we've got about a half a teaspoon of fresh ground ginger. We've got a teaspoon of thyme. We've got about a teaspoon of cumin. We have about a tablespoon of Mexican oregano. We've got about a half a teaspoon of marjoram. And we've got about a half teaspoon of coriander. That is the seed of the cilantro. And we're going to add about 3 cloves. If you don't have whole, you can use powdered. And about a half a stick of cinnamon. We're going to add the rest of our beef broth. This recipe is going to make approximately 6 or 7 quarts. So I've got my quart jars getting ready for the canning. So I'm just going to let this sort of percolate here. We're going to add extra water to this before we can, because we want to have the canning solution be rather liquidy. So I'm going to just let this simmer for maybe about another 5-10 minutes. I'm going to remove the cinnamon stick at that time, but everything else I'm going to leave in here and puree it up. Whoops, I almost forgot. A pinch of nutmeg or mace. Not too much, not even a pinch. We're going to add a splash of apple cider vinegar. You could add some smoked paprika to give your stew a good flavor. But I'm going to use about a half a teaspoon of chipotle chili pepper, which is smoked jalapeno. And I'm going to use about a half a teaspoon of green and red hatch chili flakes. This will give it a little bit of spice, but it won't be too hot. I'm going to squeeze the juice of an orange in here. just to give it that little extra citrus zing. You could add lime or lemon, and you don't want too much. You just want a little bit. Here we have our stovetop pressure canner getting ready. I put 3 quarts of water in as per my instructions for my particular canner, and the jars are warming because I'm going to have a warm product and it's going to go into warm jars. So while those are continuing to warm a little bit, we are going to puree this lovely sauce. And first, it's been simmering here for, I'd say, about 10 minutes. First, I want to find that cinnamon stick. Well, it took me some fishing, but I finally found the cinnamon stick. You could probably use, like a teaspoon of ground cinnamon if you don't want to have to fool around with the cinnamon stick. And some people even do grind the cinnamon stick up in their dish, but I'm not going to. I'm going to remove this. I'm going to go ahead and grind the cloves up. So you can blenderize this with a regular stand blender. I'm going to use my immersion blender. I'm going to blenderize this all until it's nice and smooth, and we'll come back when it's ready. Okay guys, it took me a while, but I got this all pureed up. And we're going to measure how much we have. This is too thick for canning. This has got to be watered down quite a bit. Plus, birria is traditionally more of a soup. So I'm going to add more beef broth and more water. I've got 7 quart jars. That's going to take, believe it or not, 28 cups of product. And the beef that I have is approximately, let's see, about 12 or 14 cups of beef. So I'm going to need another 12 or 14 cups of liquid. So we'll see how much puree we have, and then we're going to add some more broth and water to that till we get the amount that we need for canning these 7 jars. All right, so we've got about 6 cups of marinade. So we are going to add about another 6 to 8 cups. So I'm going to get another quart of beef broth to start with, and we'll take it from there. So I've got another quart of homemade beef broth. I've replaced the marinade into the pan. So this is going to give me 10 cups of liquid. And I'm probably going to add another 3 to 4 cups of water. I'm going to return this to a nice simmer, and then we'll can this up. Okay, so we had 6 cups of marinade, another 4 cups of broth is 10 cups, and I'm going to add another 4 cups of water. So that's going to give me about 14 cups of soup to add to my about 12 or so cups of beef, and that should fill my 7 jars. We'll hope that everything works out correctly according to my calculations. You got to do a little bit of calculating when you're a canner. So this is a beautiful, smooth consistency. It's thin enough that you can safely use this to can. It's not too thick and viscous. So as soon as we bring this to a simmer, oh wow, that's delicious looking. And it tastes great too. I've already sampled a little taste of it. Now some people will run their marinade through a strainer. I did not do that, so that's optional. This looks awesome, and I can't wait to taste the birria when it is processed and all finished. I can't wait. Looks really good. Okay, so I've washed my jars. I've warmed my jars. Now we're going to fill our jars. And I'm going to fill them as a group. I'm not going to do them one by one. I find this is a little easier, and I don't think they're going to cool off too much. So I'm going to remove each one from the pressure canner. Of course, draining the water out that I had in there to kind of stabilize them so they wouldn't fall over. So guys, feel free to make this recipe your own. Add, subtract, multiply, divide your spices, whatever spices you like. I realize I'm going to have people that comment and say this is not authentic Mexican birria. I'm not trying to represent it as being anything authentic. It's just a recipe that I adapted for canning. And I think it's going to be awesome. Okay, we're going to load the jars with some meat. I'm not even going to bother to use my funnel here. I'm just going to put a little bit in each jar till they're pretty much equal. You could do this with your fingers, but the meat's still pretty warm for being browned. Now, this 6 pounds of beef I had should about fill these jars about between a third to a half full, and that's going to be just about right. The rest of it we will fill with the broth or consomme, and that is going to give us a really nice soup. So now I'm going to get my funnel. We're going to ladle the sopa into the jars. We're going to leave about an inch of headspace in each jar. Oops, I saw a piece of onion in there that did not get blenderized. Oh well, I'm not fussy. I'm not fussy about that. I really love this ladle from Progressive on Amazon. If you can find this canning ladle and get it, it's really great. Hooks onto the side of your pan. It's got a really big scoop size of a cup. It makes the job of filling your jars much easier. Okay, we've got 2 more jars, and it looks like about the right amount of liquid there. Fingers crossed. If not, I'll have to just add a little bit of water, but I think we're going to be good. This is the last of what I prepared. I think I'm going to add a little bit of water to get the last bits out of there and to fill these jars just a little bit higher. Okay, folks, I pretty much cleared out the pot there. The jars look to be nicely filled. Now, one step we want to do before we clean the rims and put the lids on, we want to make sure there are no trapped air pockets. So we want to use our debubbling tool. And go through each jar just to make sure there are no pockets. And with the meat as loosely as I had it packed for this, I don't think we're going to find pockets. But, you know, it's always good practice to debubble. All right. Okay, now we want to add a small bay leaf to each jar also. We've got our 7 jars of this beautiful beef birria. We're going to take a wet cloth. You can put a little vinegar on the cloth to help cut the grease. And we're going to wipe down the rims to assure that the seal will be adequate. I also like to wipe the threads where the rings thread on so that it doesn't stick. Make sure there's no food on there. Almost done here. Alrighty, now we've had our lids soaking in hot water, but it's just warm water at this point. We're going to screw the lids on. Fingertip tight is what they call it. Kind of center the lid and put the ring on till it's just fingertip tight. And I can tell, but I'll show you. You can use your headspace tool to make sure you've got at least 1 inch of headspace. And I do. I've got about a little over 1 inch of headspace, so I should be good. You don't want too much over 1 inch, but you don't want less than 1 inch either. So these will go into our canner. They are hot. The water is already boiling. And that is the capacity of my canner. So that was, as I said, advanced planning. So on this particular canner, I want to line my arrows up. When I do, it falls into place. Then you just slide the handle over. We've turned the heat up to a medium to high. We're going to wait to see a plume of steam coming out of the vent here. After it vents for a full 10 minutes, we're going to set our timer for 10 minutes. And then once that 10 minutes is up, we will put the weight on. The weight depends on your elevation. For my elevation, I use a 10-pound weight. And then once the weight starts to jiggle, we're going to start our timer again for 90 minutes. This has to cook for 90 minutes because it's quarts. If it was pints, it would only have to cook for 75 minutes. Our steam is coming out at a pretty steady pace, so we're going to set the timer for 10 minutes and let this just release steam and air from the canner for 10 minutes. All right, our 10 minutes of venting is up. Put my 10-pound weight on. Now we're going to wait for the weight to start jiggling. Boy, it's noisy in this house. I got canaries going, doorbells ringing. Sorry about that. But we're going to wait for this jiggler to start jiggling, and then we'll start our 90-minute timer. Okay, it's been about 15 minutes. The jiggler is starting to jiggle. So we're going to set our timer for 90 minutes. I'm going to turn the heat down slightly. And you want it to just softly jiggle like that continuously for the next 90 minutes. So don't go anywhere. You're going to have to babysit your canner for the next 90 minutes. Don't leave your house. You can't go farther than you'll be able to hear this. If this stops jiggling, it means you don't have enough pressure. And if it stops, you have to start your canning timing all over again from the time it starts jiggling again. So let's start our timer. 90 minutes. So there we have it, softly jiggling. We'll come back in 90 minutes and turn the heat off, and then we'll let the canner cool down naturally. It'll take another hour or two, and then we can remove our beef birria in cans. Okay, my 90-minute timer has sounded. And we've been rocking and rolling like this for the whole 90 minutes. Next thing I'm going to do is just turn this off. And this is going to be allowed to come down to depressurize naturally. I'm not going to touch this. I'm not going to do anything with it. It's going to take at least an hour for this to cool down. And you want the process to be a slow process so that you don't have any breakage of your jars and you don't have any siphonage of the contents of your jars. So we'll come back in about an hour or two and remove the jars. Okay, the heat's been off for about an hour. The pressure pin has dropped, indicating that there is zero pressure within the canner. So I'm going to remove the weight. We're going to wait about another 5 minutes, and then we can open and remove the jars. Okay, we're going to see what this looks like now. I got interrupted and had to take someone to the doctor, so this has been sitting in here for a couple of hours, and it looks like the jars have already sealed. The jars are still boiling, which is good. So there we have it. 7 jars of birria. And they're rather cool because, like I said, they've been in there for a couple of hours after I opened the lid. But everything looks good. They're all sealed. So we'll let them continue to cool overnight and check them out in the morning. All right, here is our delicious birria the next day. You can see there's a little layer of fat, which is going to be good for frying tacos. all the jars sealed. I'm going to just remove the rings, wash the rings, and get them put away. And we'll enjoy some birria later today. It's going to make a great meal. So after removing the rings, I wash these, I dry them thoroughly, put them away. I also wash my jars, especially washing here because usually a little bit of grease might escape. Then we're going to label the jars with a marker, the product that's in there, and the date that we canned it. Okay, we're going to pop this open and give it a try. We're just going to bring our meat and our broth back to a boil, and then we'll be able to take some of the beef out and shred it for tacos. And look at how tender this just falls apart. I'm barely touching it with the spoon here. Delicious. Okay, so we've heated a little pan with some oil. I've got my tortilla. We dip it in the sauce here. Could probably use a little bit larger plate than I'm using here. Okay. And once we get one side a little brown, it doesn't take long, a few seconds. We'll flip it, add some cheese. I'm using queso quesadilla, but you can use jack cheese or cheddar cheese or whatever kind of cheese you like. But traditionally, these are used with the Mexican melting cheese. Some of our beef. Gosh, that's so tender. And there you have it. Delicious. So add a little bit of chopped onion, a little bit of chopped cilantro, whatever you like to add to this. Serve it with your warm sauce to dip your taco. The flavor in this is superb. It's really delicious. So now that I have gone through the process and we've eaten the tacos yesterday, my thoughts on this are that I would use more beef. I only filled these jars about halfway with beef and the other way with the broth. And I think I'd really like to have more beef in the jars and maybe a little less liquid. So that's one thing that I would like to change. I think I might like to add a little bit more spices. I would like a little more savoriness to the dish, in addition to a little bit more meat. So if I do redo this in the future, I'll probably do it that way. I may also adjust what I puree. So I may do a video in the future when I refine this recipe a little bit further. So if you like this video, please hit the like button, subscribe to my channel. Be sure you hit the notification bell so you'll be notified every time I upload a new video. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of the day. Bye-bye.